I clicked play expecting a sweet family toast, but 27 seconds in, my blood ran cold. My mother laughed, calling me a burden, and my father finished the thought with a cruel joke, all posted under my aunt's account. They thought they were untouchable, but they missed a tiny detail in the corner of the frame. That single slip-up was all I needed to dismantle the expensive life they had secretly built on my dime. My name is Marlo Hayes, and at 34 years old, I had convinced myself that distance was the only thing required to maintain a healthy relationship with my family. I lived in Newport, Rhode Island, running a high-end set design and event lighting studio that catered to people who thought nothing of dropping $50,000 on a single evening's ambiance. My life was built on heavy lifting, electrical tape, and the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your marrow. But looking at it from the outside, I suppose it looked like magic. That was the point of my job. I made things look effortless while sweating through my shirt in the shadows. It was just past 2 in the morning when the notification slid across my screen. I was alone in the studio, perched on a ladder about 12 feet in the air, adjusting the gel on a Fresnel light for a charity gala mock-up. The warehouse was silent except for the hum of the ventilation and the distant sound of the ocean battering the pier. My arms were shaking from holding the fixture in place, and my hands were coated in a fine layer of gray dust and adhesive residue. I climbed down, wiped my hands on my cargo pants, and grabbed my phone off the workbench. My thumb hovered over the screen, a TikTok notification. Aunt Raina posted a video. This was unusual. My Aunt Raina was a forensic accountant, a woman who treated social media with the same suspicion she treated tax loopholes. She rarely posted anything, and when she did, it was usually a blurry photo of her garden or a repost of a local news article, but the thumbnail showed warm, golden light and the familiar, overstuffed beige sectional of my parents' living room back in Connecticut. The caption read, "Family Toast Night. So blessed to have everyone together." I sat down on a crate, feeling a sudden, sharp pang of homesickness that I immediately tried to suppress. I had not been invited to a family toast night in 3 years. I told myself it was because I was busy, because Newport was a 2-hour drive, because my schedule was erratic. I tapped the screen. The video started. The camera work was shaky, clearly handheld, likely filmed by Raina herself. The living room looked immaculate. My father, Victor, was sitting in his leather recliner, a glass of expensive scotch resting on his knee. My mother, Diane, was perched on the arm of the sofa, holding a crystal flute of champagne, and there, center frame, was my younger sister, Sloane. She looked perfect, as always, her hair blown out in soft waves, wearing a silk lounge set that probably cost more than my first car. They were laughing. It was that rich, bubbling laughter that implies inside jokes and shared comfort. Then, my mother raised her glass toward the camera. Her eyes were bright, glazed with just enough alcohol to lower the drawbridge of her filter. "To family," she said, her voice lilting. Then she giggled, a sharp, brittle sound. And thank God Marlo isn't here to ruin the vibe with her mood. I froze. The phone felt cold in my hand. I expected someone to correct her. I expected my father to shake his head, or for Sloane to say something defensive. Instead, the camera panned slightly to Sloane. She took a sip of her drink, smirking over the rim of the glass. "Oh, please," Sloane said, her voice dripping with that specific brand of influencer condescension she had perfected for her followers. "Marlo is useful for the wire transfers. Mom, that is it? In real life? She is a total brand liability. Can you imagine her sitting here in those work boots? Tragic." The room erupted. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a full-throated, belly-shaking laugh. My father threw his head back, slapping his thigh. My mother nearly spilled her champagne. They were laughing in agreement. They were laughing because it was a truth they all shared, a comfortable reality that bound them together. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded. Useful for the wire transfers. The video looped. I watched it again and again. I looked down at my hands. They were raw. The knuckles on my right hand were scraped open from catching on a truss bolt earlier that evening. My fingernails were cut short, practical, with a trace of black paint under the thumb. There was a callus on my palm so thick it felt like leather, earned from years of hauling steel frames and wrestling with heavy cables. I remembered the transfer I had sent 2 days ago, $3,200. I sent it on the 1st of every month, like clockwork. My father called it the legacy fund, claiming it was to keep the family home in top condition so that one day it would be an asset for all of us. I had paid for the roof repair last autumn. I had paid for the new HVAC system in July. I paid the property taxes. I paid because I thought I was being a good daughter. I paid because I thought that by securing their comfort, I was securing my place at their table, even if I wasn't physically sitting there. But according to Sloan, I wasn't an investor in our family's future. I was just the wallet. And according to my mother, my presence was pollution. I wanted to throw the phone across the warehouse. I wanted to scream until the windows rattled. But I didn't. I sat there in the silence of my studio, surrounded by the beautiful fake world I built for strangers, and felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. I watched the video a 4th time. This time, I wasn't listening to the words. The shock had dulled just enough for my professional eye to take over. I was a set designer. My entire career was built on noticing details, on seeing what was in the frame that shouldn't be, on understanding how objects told a story. I looked past my mother's hateful smile. I looked past Sloane's silk pajamas. I scanned the clutter on the side table next to my father's recliner. It was a mess of coasters, a TV remote, and his phone, but sticking out from underneath the phone was the corner of a yellow envelope. I paused the video. I pinched the screen to zoom in. The resolution was high enough, Sloan always insisted on filming in 4K, that I could make out the logo in the corner of the envelope. It was a blue shield with a gold eagle. First National Bank. My heart skipped a beat. My parents didn't bank with First National. They had been with a local credit union for 40 years. My father had always preached about the evils of big commercial banks, calling them predators. So why was there a yellow envelope from First National, the kind usually reserved for urgent notices or certified mail, sitting on his table? I squinted. The flap of the envelope was torn open, jaggedly, as if in a hurry, and right next to it, partially obscured by the Scotch glass, was another piece of paper. It looked like a credit card offer, or maybe a statement. I screenshotted the frame. I opened my photo editor and played with the contrast and exposure, trying to sharpen the text on the envelope. There. It was faint, but legible enough. The date stamp was from 3 days ago, and the addressee name, partially covered by the phone, started with an M. M-A-R. Marlowe. It wasn't addressed to Victor Hayes. It was addressed to me. But the address on the line below it was their address. A cold chill, colder than the Rhode Island wind outside, washed over me. I had never opened an account with First National. I had never lived at that house as an adult. I had no mail going there. I looked back at the frozen image of my father laughing. Suddenly, the joke wasn't about my personality or my work boots. The joke was on me, in a way that was far more sinister than simple familial cruelty. They weren't just taking the $3,200 I sent them every month. That was just the cover charge. I looked at Sloane's silk set again. I looked at the bottle of scotch, which I knew cost at least $200. I looked at the brand new tablet sitting on the coffee table. She's only good for transfers. No, I was good for more than that. I was good for credit scores. I was good for loans. I was good for a life they couldn't afford but refused to give up. I lowered the phone. The warehouse felt massive and empty, swallowing me whole. I looked at the unfinished stage set in front of me, a facade of a castle, made of foam and plywood, painted to look like stone. It was fake, just like the idea that my parents loved me, just like the idea that I was helping them preserve a legacy. I wasn't preserving a legacy, I was subsidizing a fraud. I stood up, my knees cracking. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a crystalline, icy clarity. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who still had hope that things were a misunderstanding. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a confession caught on tape. They thought I was a freeloader? That was the word that hung in the air. Unspoken, but implied by every sneer in that 27-second clip. They thought I was a burden because I didn't fit their aesthetic, while they quietly cannibalized my financial future. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. I didn't go to social media to comment. I didn't text my sister to ask what the hell was wrong with her. Instead, I opened my banking portal. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded strange, flat and dangerous. "You want to see what a liability looks like? Let's see how you handle the overhead when the investor pulls out." I logged in. I navigated to the recurring transfers tab. There it was. Mom and Dad. House upkeep. Scheduled for the 1st of the month. $3,200. I moved the cursor to the cancel button. For a second, hesitation flickered. It was a habit, a reflex ingrained in me since childhood. Take care of the family. Don't rock the boat. Be the good girl. But then I heard my mother's laugh in my head again. "Thank God Marlo isn't here." I clicked. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" the screen asked. I didn't blink. I clicked yes. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the credit bureau. It was 3 a.m, so I knew I would get an automated system, but that was fine. I needed to start the freeze. I needed to see the report. They had enjoyed their toast. They had enjoyed their laugh, but they had forgotten the most important rule of lighting design. You never, ever let the audience see the cables that power the show, because once you cut the power, the magic dies, and all you are left with is a dark, empty room. And I was about to turn out the lights. For years, I had treated my relationship with my family like a delicate lighting rig, something that required constant adjustment, expensive maintenance, and a steady flow of power just to keep from going dark. I had convinced myself that the $3,200 I sent on the 1st of every month was simply the cost of doing business. It was the price of admission to the Hayes family dynamic. In my banking app, the transaction was always labeled home upkeep. That was the agreed-upon euphemism. My father, Victor, liked to frame it as a noble endeavor. He would stand in the foyer of that sprawling Victorian house in Connecticut, gesturing at the crown molding I had paid to restore, and tell me that we were stewards of history. He said we were holding on to the ancestral seat for the next generation. But looking at the transaction history now, scrolling back through months and years of payments, I realized it was not a stewardship, it was a lease. They had not been able to afford that house since I was 22. The math had fallen apart over a decade ago. But the performance had to continue. And like any high-budget production that runs out of funding, they needed a silent producer to cover the deficit. That was me. I was the silent partner who kept the lights on so they could play the role of the landed gentry. The irony of the word freeloader tasted like copper in my mouth. I sat there in the cold silence of my studio and thought about the word freeloader. A freeloader takes without giving. A freeloader consumes resources they did not earn. By that definition, the people in that video were the textbook definition of the term, yet they had projected it onto me with such seamless confidence that they almost believed it themselves. It wasn't just the house, it was Sloan. My sister's entire career was a set I had built. She called herself a lifestyle entrepreneur. Her Instagram bio boasted about her self-made success, her grit, her eye for design, but I knew the ledger, I knew the overhead. When she launched her boutique candle line 2 years ago, she didn't have the capital for the initial inventory. I paid for it, $5,000 for wax, jars, and custom labels. When she needed a pop-up shop in Soho to generate buzz, she didn't hire a contractor. I drove a van full of lumber down from Newport, slept in the back of the vehicle for 3 nights, and built her display shelves by hand. I rigged the lighting so her skin looked flawless. I paid the rental fee for the space because her credit card was maxed out. She had posted a photo of herself standing in front of my work, captioning it, "Built this dream with my own 2 hands." I had liked the post. I had commented. So proud of you. I looked at my own hands now, still stained with the grime of my actual labor. I had facilitated their delusion. I had subsidized their fantasy because I thought that was what love looked like. I thought love was a sunk cost, that if I just poured enough into the deficit, eventually the account would balance out and they would see me. They would value me. But you cannot buy equity in people who view you as a utility, to them. I was not a shareholder in this family. I was the electric company. You do not thank the electric company for keeping the lights on. You only notice them when the power goes out. And you certainly do not invite the electric company to a champagne toast. A memory clawed its way up from the bottom of my mind. A memory I usually kept suppressed because it hurt too much to look at directly. I was 18 years old. It was late August, humid and sticky. I was sitting at the kitchen table with an acceptance letter to a prestigious design program in New York. I had a scholarship that covered half the tuition, but I needed the rest. My grandmother, on her deathbed, had told me she left a specific savings bond for my education. It was supposed to be $40,000. I asked my mother about it that night. Diane had not looked at me. She was busy polishing silverware that we never used. She told me the money was gone. Gone? I had asked, my voice trembling. We had to make a strategic decision, my father had interjected, walking into the room with that air of authoritative calm he used to mask incompetence. Sloan had that opportunity with the modeling agency in Miami, the portfolio fees, the travel, the coaching. It was a time-sensitive investment. Marlo, you understand. School will always be there. Sloan's window is now. They had liquidated my inheritance to pay for my sister to chase a dream that lasted exactly 6 months before she got bored. We are investing in the family brand, my mother had added, finally looking at me. When Sloan makes it, we all make it. Don't be selfish. Marlo, you can work. You're strong like that. Sloan is delicate. Delicate. That was the word they used to justify the cannibalization of my future. Sloan was delicate, so she deserved the meat. I was strong, so I could survive on the scraps. I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through design school. I had scrubbed toilets, bartended until 4 a.m, and slept 4 hours a night for 4 years. I never asked them for a dime, and when I finally started making real money, instead of saving it, I started sending it back to them. I started paying the home upkeep fee. Why? Because I was desperate to prove that I was valuable too. I wanted to show them that the workhorse could bring home just as much glory as the show pony. I had been fighting a losing battle against my own psychology. It was the classic gambler's fallacy. I had already lost so much to them. My college fund, my self-esteem, my boundaries, that I kept throwing more chips on the table, hoping to win it all back. I thought if I just wrote one more check, paid for one more renovation, saved Sloan from one more financial cliff, they would finally look at me with the same adoration they gave her. But the video made it clear. The game was rigged. The house always wins. I stared at the cancel recurring transfer confirmation on my screen. For the first time in my life, the fear was gone. Usually, the thought of disappointing them made my chest tight. The thought of my father's disappointed sigh or my mother's cold silence was enough to make me cave. But that fear had been replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. If I was truly a freeloader, as they claimed, then my absence should change nothing. If I was a burden, then removing myself should lighten their load. But I knew better. I knew the structural integrity of the life they were living. I knew which beams were load-bearing, and I knew exactly whose back was supporting those beams. I picked up a pen and opened a fresh notebook. I wasn't going to just cut them off and walk away. That was too emotional. That was too messy. I needed to be precise. I needed to understand the full scope of the extraction. I wrote down the date, May 12th. I wrote down the amount, $3,200. Then I started listing everything else, the cell phone plan, the streaming services, the cloud storage Sloan used for her content, the insurance on the car my mother drove, the storage unit fee for the props. The list grew. It filled half the page. Then I remembered the envelope from the video, the First National Bank logo. A terrible, sinking suspicion began to form in my gut. If they were willing to take my cash to my face, what were they willing to take behind my back? My father had my social security number. He had my old tax returns from when I first started the business. He had access to documents I had blindly trusted him with because, despite everything, he was my father. I realized I couldn't just stop the payments. I had to audit the entire relationship. I had to look at my family not as my flesh and blood, but as a hostile corporate entity that had been embezzling from me for decades. I closed the banking app and opened my credit monitoring service. My finger hovered over the login button. They called me a freeloader. They laughed about it. They toasted to it. I typed in my password. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction, I would oblige them, but they had forgotten that in business, when the silent partner discovers fraud, they don't just leave, they liquidate the assets, they call in the debts, and they ensure that every single penny is accounted for. I hit enter. If they thought I was a freeloader, I was about to show them exactly what life felt like when the sponsorship deal was permanently canceled. It took me exactly 45 minutes to dismantle the ecosystem my family had spent a decade inhabiting. There was no adrenaline rush, no shaking hands, no second guessing. I felt the way I did when I was striking a set after a long production run. The show was over. The audience had gone home. It was time to pull the cables, pack the crates, and turn off the main breaker. I started with the credit cards. I logged into my primary American Express account. There were 2 authorized user cards listed under my primary account, one for Diane Hayes, one for Victor Hayes. I had added them 5 years ago for emergencies, a word that apparently had a very loose definition in the Hayes household. I clicked on the recent activity for my mother's card. Sephora, $240. Whole Foods, $312. Shell Station, $60. I clicked on my father's card. Total Wine and Spirits, $180. The Club at River Oaks, $450. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply selected the option for Manage Cards. I checked the box next to Diane Hayes. Then I checked the box next to Victor Hayes. The system asked me for a reason. I scrolled through the drop-down menu, lost, stolen, damaged. I selected stolen, because that was the truth. They hadn't stolen the physical plastic, but they had stolen the trust that authorized it. They had stolen the intent. By reporting them as stolen, the issuer would immediately kill the active numbers. If my mother tried to swipe that card for her morning latte in 6 hours, the machine would scream at her. If my father tried to pay for his golf round, the terminal would reject him. I confirmed the request. Cards canceled. New cards will be mailed to the primary account holder's address. That was key. The replacements would come to me here in Newport. They would be cut off from the source, physically and digitally. Next came the digital subscriptions. I opened my password manager. It was a long, scrolling list of logins that I paid for but rarely used myself. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Spotify Family Plan, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. My family used these accounts like they were public utilities. I could see the profiles. Sloan's World, Mom and Dad, Guest. I went through them one by one. I didn't just cancel the subscriptions. That would take until the end of the billing cycle to kick in. I wanted the screens to go black tonight. I went into the security settings for each account. Sign out of all devices. Change password. I typed in a new, randomized string of 20 characters for each one. Click, confirm, done. Somewhere in Connecticut, if Sloan was up late binge-watching a series, her TV just froze. If my dad was listening to a podcast to fall asleep, it just cut to silence. Then I moved to the infrastructure that actually mattered, the data. Sloan was an influencer. Her entire career existed on the cloud. She used a premium 2 terabyte storage plan to house her raw footage, her high-resolution edits, and her portfolio. It was linked to my email. It was billed to my card. I logged in. I saw the folder structure. Sloan, brand collabs. Sloan, Personal. Sloan, wedding mood boards. I didn't delete the files. I wasn't a monster. I just changed the password and removed her recovery email address. Then I downgraded the plan from the premium tier to the free tier. Effective immediately. The system warned me that access to files exceeding the limit will be restricted until payment is updated. She wouldn't lose her work, but she would find herself locked out of the library she needed to post her morning story. Finally, the warehouse. My studio in Newport had a massive storage facility where I kept my lighting rigs, vintage furniture, and props. Sloan treated it like her personal walk-in closet. She would drive up with her friends, load up a van with my vintage velvet armchairs and brass lamps for a photo shoot, and leave the place a mess. She had her own entry code. I pulled up the security app on my phone. User, Sloan, status, active, code, 0819. Her birthday, typical. I hit delete user. Then I changed the master gate code just to be safe. I sat back in my chair. The fan on my laptop whirred in the silence. It was done. The financial umbilical cord had been severed. But I knew my family. I knew that when a parasite is detached from the host, it doesn't just die quietly. It thrashes. It accuses. It tries to reattach. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Evidence. I took screenshots of every cancellation confirmation. I downloaded the transaction logs showing the years of payments. I saved the email confirmations of the password changes. I wanted a paper trail that proved I was the owner, the payer, and the administrator of every single one of these services. If they tried to claim I was hacking them, I would have the receipts proving I was simply securing my own property. I picked up my phone one last time. Aunt Raina's video was still paused on the screen, frozen on the image of the yellow envelope. I didn't need to watch it again. I didn't need to hear the laugh again to keep my anger warm. The anger had crystallized into something harder, something permanent. I closed the app. I turned off the phone. I went to the small cot I kept in the back office for long nights, pulled a wool blanket over me, and for the first time in years, I slept without the crushing weight of obligation on my chest. 9 o'clock. I woke up to the sun streaming through the warehouse skylights. I felt rested. Strange. I turned on my phone. It vibrated instantly. Then again, a steady rhythmic buzzing that lasted for a full minute as the queue of notifications flooded in. 37 missed calls, 14 text messages, 5 voicemails. I made a coffee before I opened anything. I wanted to be fully awake. I took a sip, felt the heat hit my chest, and then opened the first message. It was from my mother. There was no good morning. There was no, are you okay? There was no, we miss you. Diane Hayes, 9:02 a.m. Card declined at the gas station. Humiliating. Fix it immediately. The PIN isn't working either. I took a screenshot. Diane Hayes, 9:05 a.m. Marlo, answer me. I'm standing at the counter. Diane Hayes, 9:12 a.m. Are you doing this because of the toast video? Don't be petty. It was a joke. Turn the card back on. She knew, deep down, she knew exactly why this was happening. But her instinct wasn't apology. It was command. She thought she could order me to be a doormat. I swiped to Instagram. Sloan had posted a story 20 minutes ago. It was a black screen with white serif text, her signature serious aesthetic. Sloan Hayes posted, "Sad day when you realize the people who are supposed to support you are actually preying on your downfall. Jealousy is a disease, even in families. Protecting my peace and my energy today from toxic relatives who use money to control people. Self-made toxic, family rise above." I almost laughed. She was spinning the narrative before the ink was even dry. She was painting herself as the victim of financial abuse, conveniently leaving out the part where the money she was being controlled with was actually my money that she had been spending for free. She was smart. She was trying to get out ahead of the truth. I took a screenshot. Then I saw the voicemail icon, a red dot. One message from Dad. I pressed play and put it on speaker. My father's voice filled the small office. It wasn't the jovial, booming voice from the toast video. It was low, tight, and shaking with a suppression of rage that I had only heard a few times in my childhood. "Marlowe," he said. There was a pause, heavy with breathing. "I don't know what kind of game you think you are playing, locking us out of the accounts, but you need to understand something. You don't get to punish us. We made you, everything you have, that little business of yours. It exists because we allowed it." Another pause. I could hear ice clinking in a glass in the background. It was 9 a.m. "You open the accounts back up by noon," he continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Or we are going to have a very different conversation, a very public conversation. You think you can cut us off? You have no idea what you are starting. Call me." Click. I saved the audio file. I renamed it threatvictor01.mp3 and dragged it into the evidence folder. My father thought he was issuing an ultimatum. He thought he was scary, but he didn't realize that by leaving that voicemail, he had just handed me the first piece of ammunition for a war he wasn't equipped to fight. He said I had no idea what I was starting. He was wrong. I knew exactly what I was starting. I was starting the audit. And based on the panic in his voice, I knew that the $3,200 a month was just the tip of the iceberg. They weren't just mad that the free ride was over. They were terrified of what I would find now that I had stopped writing checks and started looking at the books. I waited exactly 10 minutes after saving my father's threatening voicemail before I made the call. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Sloan. I called the only person in the Hayes family tree who scared them more than I did. Raina Caldwell picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering how long it would take you," she said. Her voice was dry, devoid of the frantic energy that usually plagued my family. It was the voice of a woman who spent her days dissecting corporate corpses to find the cause of death. "Did you know?" I asked. I didn't need to specify what. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, she replied. "Unlock the side door." Raina arrived at my studio with the precision of a SWAT team entering a hostile compound. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer a platitude about how hard this must be. She walked in carrying a ruggedized laptop case and a portable document scanner. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer and the kind of glasses that made you feel like she could see your credit score just by looking at your face. She set the laptop down on my drafting table, pushing aside a stack of lighting schematics. "The video," I said, leaning against the wall. I needed to hear her say it. "You're meticulous. Raina, you don't post blurry toasts with bad audio unless there is a reason." Raina opened her laptop, the screen glowing against her sharp features. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "I have suspected for a long time that Victor and Diane were leveraging your income to sustain a lifestyle that mathematically should have collapsed in 2015, she said calmly. "But suspicion is not evidence, and denial is a powerful drug. Marlowe, if I had just told you they were using you, you would have defended them. You would have made excuses. You needed to see the contempt with your own eyes. You needed to hear the laughter." She paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I didn't post that video for the family archives. Marlowe, I posted it as a subpoena for your conscience." A chill went down my spine. It was a trap, a benevolent, brutal trap set by my own aunt to force me to wake up. "Sit down," she commanded. "We need to look at the books, not your books, theirs." "I don't have their bank logins," I said, pulling up a stool. Raina raised an eyebrow. "You set up their online banking in 2018 when Victor locked himself out 3 times in a week. Do not tell me you didn't save the password in your manager." She was right. I opened my password vault, found the entry for Mom and Dad, main checking, and typed it in. The dashboard loaded. I expected to see red. I expected to see overdraft fees. But at first glance, the balance looked surprisingly healthy. "Scroll down," Raina said, putting on her glasses. "Look at the outflows. Ignore the grocery bills. Look for the fixed costs." I scrolled: mortgage, utilities, car lease, and then a line item that repeated on the 15th of every single month. Vantapulse Media GRP Recurring SVC. The amount was $3,950. I frowned. The name sounded familiar. Vantapulse. Dad told me about this a year ago. He said he hired a consulting firm to build him a professional website for some independent contracting work he was trying to get. He said the hosting fees were high because of the security packages. Raina let out a short, sharp sound that might have been a laugh if she were a different person. $3,950 a month for a consulting website? She asked. Marlo, I audit Fortune 500 companies. Their server costs aren't that high. She opened a new tab on her browser. Her fingers flew across the keys, bypassing Google and going straight to a corporate registry database she subscribed to. Vantapulse Media Group, she read aloud as the results populated. Registered in the British Virgin Islands, no physical office in the United States. Parent company is a holding firm called Shadowreach. What do they do? I asked, a pit forming in my stomach. They are not a web host, Raina said grimly. They are a reputation management firm. Specifically, they specialize in inorganic growth acceleration. Inorganic growth? Fake engagement, Raina translated. Bots, click farms, comment automation. She spun the laptop around so I could see the screen. She had navigated to a client portal login page for Vantapulse. Try the same password, she said. Victor is lazy. He never uses unique credentials. I typed in the password. Access granted. The screen that greeted us wasn't a website builder. It was a dashboard, but it wasn't for my father's consulting business. At the top of the screen, in big bold letters, was the account handle, @SloanStyle. I felt the blood drain from my face. Below the handle were graphs and charts, all trending upward in artificial, jagged spikes. Look at the invoice history, Raina instructed, pointing to the sidebar. I clicked. A list of PDF invoices cascaded down the screen. Going back 3 years, I opened the most recent one. Invoice 49201, service period. April item 1, premium follower package, tier gold, $2,000. Item 2, engagement bundle, likes, shares spread, $1,000. Item 3, custom comment farm, positive sentiment lifestyle keywords, $950. Total, $3,950. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. Sloane's career, her empire, her 50,000 followers, the brands that sent her free clothes, the launch parties, the community she bragged about constantly. It was all fake. They bought it, I whispered. They bought her career. No, Raina corrected me, her voice cutting through the fog. They didn't buy it. You did. She tapped the screen. Look at the dates. Marlo, you transfer $3,200 on the 1st. The mortgage comes out on the 5th. But look at the account balance history. Without your deposit, they would hit 0 by the 10th. Your money hits the account, sits there for 2 weeks, and then on the 15th, it flows almost entirely into Vantapulse. I felt sick, physically nauseous. I remembered the times Sloane had lectured me about branding. I remembered her telling me I needed to understand the algorithm. I remembered my mother telling me that Sloane worked harder than anyone she knew, that her success was pure grit. It wasn't grit, it was a subscription service. I had been breaking my back, climbing ladders, hauling steel, and working 18-hour days to earn the money that they were funneling into a server farm in Eastern Europe so that Sloane could pretend to be famous. The comments, I said, navigating to the Comment Farm tab. The people telling her she's an inspiration. Scripts, Raina said. Look. She opened a file labeled Target Keywords. Keywords, goals, queen, obsessed. Need this. Link, please. It is a house of cards built inside a wind tunnel, Raina said, sitting back. But it is worse than just vanity. Marlo, this is fraud. Fraud? Sloane has brand deals, Raina explained, her accountant brain taking over. I have seen her tag protein shakes and skincare lines. She gets paid for those partnerships based on her engagement metrics. If she is presenting falsified data to those companies to secure contracts and using your money to generate that falsified data, that is theft by deception. and because the money crosses state lines and international borders via the internet. Wire fraud, I finished, the term heavy on my tongue. Raina nodded. Victor is facilitating it, Diane is condoning it, and you are the unwitting financier. I looked at the invoices again. 3 years. $3,950 a month. That was over $140,000. That was more than the down payment on the house I'd been saving for, but never felt I could afford because I was always helping them. Print it, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Print everything. Raina didn't ask if I was sure. She connected the laptop to the portable printer. Click, Page after page slid out. Invoices, bot logs, payment histories. The undeniable proof that my family wasn't just toxic. They were a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of suburban mediocrity. There is one more thing, Raina said as the printer rhythmically churned out the evidence. She pulled a piece of paper from her briefcase. When I was digging into the Vantapulse connection, I ran a credit check on the address they used for the billing. She slid the paper across the desk to me. I found a credit card application from 18 months ago. It lists your parents' address, but the applicant's name isn't Victor, and it isn't Diane. I looked at the document. It was a rejection letter from a high-end credit card issuer, stating that the applicant already had too much open credit. The applicant's name was Marlo Hayes. I never applied for this, I said, staring at the date. I was in Chicago for the trade show that week. I know, Raina said softly, but someone with access to your social security number and your mother's maiden name did. The nausea returned, violent and sharp. They tried to open a card in my name? They didn't just try, Raina said, and her eyes were dark, serious. This is the rejection letter for the second card. Marlo, the first one, the one approved 6 months prior to this, is currently active. I looked at the corner of the video freeze frame on my phone. The yellow envelope. The letter from the bank. The envelope, I realized aloud. The one in the video. That wasn't just a notice. That was a bill for a card I didn't know I had. Raina nodded. And judging by the fact that it came via certified mail, they have stopped paying it. I looked at the stack of freshly printed bought invoices, and then at the rejection letter. The picture was complete. They hadn't just used me as a wallet. They had worn me like a skin suit. They had taken my money, my name, and my credit, and fed it all into the furnace of Sloane's vanity. This isn't a family dispute anymore, Raina said, closing the laptop with a definitive snap. This is a crime scene, and we are going to process it. The silence in the studio was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a room right before a flashover fire. Raina sat at my desk, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of her laptop. She had just pulled up the full credit report, bypassing the summary screen to get to the raw data. 18 months, Raina said, her voice flat. The account was opened 18 months ago. The limit is $25,000. I leaned over her shoulder, staring at the screen. The issuer was a premium rewards card, the kind that comes with heavy annual fees and metal cards you drop on the table to make a sound. The cardholder name was Marlo Hayes, but the billing address was 14 Maplewood Drive, my parents' house. They maxed it out in the first 90 days, Raina noted, scrolling down the transaction history. Then they made minimum payments for a year to keep the line active. But look at the last 3 months. No payments. Missed. I felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. That explains the yellow envelope. Exactly, Raina said. First National doesn't send certified mail for a late fee. They send it when they are preparing to charge off the debt and sell it to collections. That envelope in the video wasn't just a bill. Marlo, it was a legal threat addressed to you, which they were ignoring while drinking champagne. I forced myself to look at the spending. If the bot farm invoices were the smoking gun of their vanity, this credit card statement was the autopsy of their greed. It wasn't used for emergencies. There were no charges for medical bills or home repairs. Lux Auto Leasing, $1,200. Lux Auto Leasing, $1,200. They leased a car, I whispered. Dad told me his old sedan finally died, and he got a deal on a used Buick. That is the lease payment for a Range Rover or a high-end Mercedes, Raina corrected, and it is in your name. If he crashes it, you are liable. If he stops paying, they repossess it and ruin your credit. I kept scrolling. Serenity Med Spa, $450. Nordstrom Personal Shopper, $800. The Gilded Lily Boutique, $300. Then I saw a charge that made me pause. It was dated 6 months ago, for a flat fee of $2,500. The vendor was Clean Slate Digital Reputation. What is this? I pointed at the screen. Raina adjusted her glasses. Do you remember when Sloane got called out by that other influencer for copying her candle packaging design? It was a minor scandal on TikTok. I remember, I said. She told me she handled it with grace and the haters just got bored. She didn't handle it, Raina said. She paid a crisis management firm $2,500 to scrub the negative search results and bury the accusation under a pile of fake positive articles, and she paid for it with your credit card. I walked away from the desk, pacing the length of the studio. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. Victor had used my identity not just because he needed money, but because, in his twisted logic, my credit score was a family asset. It was a resource to be harvested, like lumber from a forest. Check my score, I said, stopping in front of a lighting rig. Check my FICO right now. Raina tabbed over to the credit monitoring site. The page refreshed. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Well, I asked. 620, she said quietly. I felt the floor drop out from under me. What? It was 780 last time we looked at your business loan application, Raina said. It has dropped 160 points. Marlo, the utilization ratio on this fraudulent card is 100%, and the missed payments are hitting you now. I grabbed the edge of a work table to steady myself. My business line of credit, I choked out. The renewal is next month. The bank reviews my personal credit as the guarantor. If I am at 620, they will cut the line, Raina finished for me, or they will jack up the interest rate to something predatory. You won't be able to buy the inventory for the autumn wedding season. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or being called a freeloader. This was an existential threat to my livelihood. They had planted a bomb in the foundation of my life, and the timer was hitting 0. We have to stop this, I said. Now. Raina spun her chair around to face me. Then you have to do exactly what I say. No hesitation, no sentimentality. This is a surgical procedure. She opened a new document. First, she said, typing rapidly, we freeze your credit at all 3 bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. We lock the door so they cannot open anything else. Not a store card, not a loan, nothing. Do it, I said. Second, she continued, we file an affidavit of identity theft with the Federal Trade Commission. This creates a federal record. It is the only way to get the bank to remove the fraudulent debt from your name. Okay. Third, Raina looked me dead in the eye. We file a police report. I froze. Police report? Against my parents? Against the perpetrator of identity theft, Raina said, her voice hard. The bank will not forgive a $25,000 debt just because you say, it wasn't me. They require a police report to prove you are serious. Without it, you are liable for the debt. With it, you are a victim of a crime. She let that hang in the air. If you don't file, Marlo, you are accepting the debt. You are paying for the Range Rover. You are paying for the reputation scrubbing. And you are letting your studio go under. I looked at the studio around me. I looked at the lights I had wired, the sets I had built, the business I had grown from nothing while they laughed at me. File it, I said. As Raina began navigating the online forms for the credit freeze, my phone buzzed again. It was a direct message on Instagram from Sloane. I picked it up, expecting an apology, or maybe a plea. Sloane, 10:15 a.m. Hey sis, Mom is freaking out about the cards. Look, I get it. You're feeling unappreciated. I can fix this. I'll do a series of stories today about how great my big sister is. I'll tag your design page. I usually charge $2,000 for that kind of exposure, but I'll do it for free as a peace offering. Just turn the money back on, okay? We have a dinner reservation tonight. I stared at the screen. She thought this was a negotiation. She thought she could pay me off with a shout-out. She actually believed that her Instagram tags were a currency valuable enough to trade for my dignity and my financial safety. She didn't see me as a person who had been violated. She saw me as a disgruntled vendor who needed a little PR love to get back to work. They don't get it, I said, my voice low. They actually don't get it. What? Raina asked, not looking up from her typing. Sloane just offered to tag me to fix this, I said. She thinks this is a branding issue. I looked at the message again. I usually charge $2,000. The delusion was total. They were drowning in a sea of fake metrics and stolen money, and they still thought they were the ones doing me a favor. Raina, I said, setting the phone down face down. After we file the police report, I want to draft a cease and desist, and I want to evict them. Raina stopped typing. She looked up. Evict them from where? From my life, I said. But also, I need to check the deed on the house, because if Victor used my credit to float his loans, I need to know if he used my name on the title to refinance the mortgage. Raina's eyes widened slightly. You think he put you on the deed? I think, I said, walking back to the computer, that if I am paying for the roof, and I am paying for the upkeep, and I am the one with the credit score he needed, then there is a very good chance I am not just a freeloader. I grabbed a fresh notepad. I think I might be the landlord. But first, I had to secure the perimeter. Freeze it all, Raina, I commanded. And when the police report is ready, I will sign it. I am done protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. I watched the progress bar on the credit freeze screen. Equifax. Frozen. TransUnion. Frozen. Experian. Frozen. The invisible walls were going up. For the first time in 18 months, my identity belonged to me again, and in Connecticut. I knew the credit card terminal at a dinner reservation was about to display a message that no amount of Instagram followers could fix. Transaction denied. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The heavy industrial sliding door of my studio rattled on its tracks. It wasn't the polite knock of a client or the rhythmic tap of a delivery driver. It was a shove, entitled, aggressive, and assuming the door would yield simply because they commanded it to. I was standing at the prep table, calibrating a row of LED projection units for a wedding that weekend. I didn't look up immediately. I tightened a clamp, checked the DMX address on the display, and wiped a smudge of grease from the lens. Marlo! My mother's voice echoed off the high concrete ceilings, bouncing around the warehouse like a screeching feedback loop. I set the wrench down. I took a slow breath, centering myself the way I did before calling a live show, and turned around. They stood there in a triangular formation that looked rehearsed. Victor was at the point, wearing a navy blazer that was slightly too tight across the middle. His face flushed a mottled red. Diane was to his right, clutching her quilted handbag like a weapon, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, and Sloane was lagging slightly behind, phone in hand, thumb scrolling, looking bored, but radiating a distinct nervous energy. They looked like a delegation from a country that had just declared war, but forgot to bring the ammunition. You changed the locks on the digital gate, Victor barked, skipping the greeting. We had to park on the street and walk through the loading dock. Do you have any idea how unprofessional that looks? Hello to you too, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I didn't move from behind the table. It was my barricade, my command center. Diane stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. She lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were narrowed with a mixture of fury and panic. This isn't funny. Marlo, she hissed. I was at the caterer's office. We are hosting the summer solstice mixer tonight. I tried to pay the deposit for the wine service, and the card, the black one, was declined. The machine made a noise. People looked at me. She shuddered, as if the embarrassment was a physical assault. "Fix it," she commanded, waving a hand at me as if I were a servant who had forgotten to polish the silver. "Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. I need that card active by 4 o'clock." "It wasn't a mistake," I said calmly. Sloane looked up from her phone. She scanned the studio, her eyes raking over the trusses, the coils of thick black cable, the unfinished plywood flats leaning against the wall. She wrinkled her nose. "God, it smells like sawdust and sweat in here," she muttered. She looked at me, taking in my work boots and the cargo pants smeared with dust. A smirk touched her lips, the same smirk from the video. "Honestly, Marlowe," Sloane sighed, walking over to inspect a lighting console she didn't understand. "I don't know why you act like such a CEO with all this drama. You just hang lights and build wooden boxes. It is basically glorified construction work. Stop power tripping and just turn Mom's money back on." Mom's money. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with delusion. "It is not a power trip, Sloane," I said. "It is a security measure." Victor stepped in, sensing that Diane's shrieking and Sloane's condescension weren't working. He adopted his benevolent patriarch stance, chest out, hands on hips, a pained smile plastered on his face. "Marlowe, honey," he began, his voice dropping to a confidential boom. "Listen, I know you are upset about whatever perceived slight you think happened. Maybe we have been hard on you, but we have a real problem right now, a cash flow timing issue." He took a step closer, invading my workspace. "The contractor for the sunroom renovation," Victor said, looking me in the eye with impressive sincerity. "He is threatening to walk off the job if we don't give him the next draw. We need $50,000. Marlowe, today, if he leaves, the materials will rot. The house value will tank. We are doing this for the family asset. You understand assets, don't you?" $50,000. He said it so casually, as if he were asking to borrow a cup of sugar, as if $50,000 wasn't more than most people made in a year, as if he hadn't already drained every other account dry. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. He wasn't renovating a sunroom. There was no contractor. $50,000, I repeated. "It is an investment," Victor insisted, gaining confidence because I hadn't screamed yet. "I just need you to authorize a transfer or co-sign a bridge loan, just until my consulting fees clear next month." I picked up a rag and slowly wiped my hands. I looked from Victor to Diane to Sloane. "Dad," I said, my voice soft, almost conversational. "Do you need $50,000 for a sunroom contractor? Or do you need $50,000 because Vantapulse Media Group is threatening to turn off the bot farm if you don't pay the premium invoice?" The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air right out of their lungs. Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish hauled onto a dock. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. Diane froze, her hand halfway to her sunglasses. Sloane dropped her phone. It hit the concrete with a loud crack. But she didn't even look down. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me with terrified recognition. What? Victor stammered, his voice cracking. I don't know what you are talking about." "I think you do," I said, leaning forward, resting my palms on the table. Vantapulse, the British Virgin Islands, the inorganic growth package, tier gold, $3,950 a month. I shifted my gaze to Sloane. "Did you know, Sloane? Did you know that your 50,000 followers are mostly code running on a server in Eastern Europe? Or did you think you were just naturally trending?" Sloane's face crumbled. The arrogant, bored influencer mask dissolved, replaced by the panicked look of a child caught stealing from the register. "You don't understand," she began, her voice wobbling. Tears welled up in her eyes. Instant, practiced tears. "The algorithm is so hard. Marlowe, everyone does it. It is just kickstarting the engine. I have so much pressure on me. I have to maintain an image for us, for the family. She grabbed her mother's arm. She is trying to ruin me. Mom, she is jealous. She has always been jealous because she works in the dark and I am in the spotlight. Diane snapped out of her shock and immediately went on the offensive. She stepped in front of Sloane, shielding her. "How dare you?" Diane spat, shaking a finger at me. "How dare you spy on your father's business dealings? You are selfish. Marlo, you have always been selfish. You sit here in your little warehouse, hoarding your money, while your sister is out there trying to build a brand for this family's name. You live off our reputation. The name Hayes opens doors for you in this town, and don't you forget it." "The name Hayes," I said, cutting her off, "is currently synonymous with a credit score of 620 and a maxed-out credit card that I never applied for." Victor flinched. "Now, Marlo, that was a misunderstanding." "Stop," I said. I walked around the table. They stepped back instinctively. The power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the daughter asking for approval anymore. I was the producer, and they were the talent who had just been fired. "You came here for money," I said. "You came here to demand I fix the problems you created. You called me a freeloader. You laughed at me." I pointed to a metal table in the center of the room where clients usually sat to review blueprints. On it sat a thick, black 3-ring binder. "I am not going to give you $50,000, I said, "and I am not going to turn the cards back on." "Then we are leaving," Diane shrieked, "and don't expect an invite to Christmas." "If you leave," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "then the police report I drafted this morning regarding identity theft and wire fraud gets filed at 5 o'clock today." Victor stopped dead in his tracks. He turned slowly, his eyes locked on mine. He knew exactly what that meant. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "We are your parents." "Then sit down," I ordered. I pulled out a chair. The metal legs scraped harshly against the concrete. "Sit down," I repeated. "Today, we are not going to talk like a family. We are going to talk like adults. And adults talk with paperwork." I walked over to the binder and opened it. The first page was the screenshot of the Toast video. The second page was the Vantapulse invoice. The third page was the credit card application with the forged signature. "Take a seat. Victor," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. "We have a lot of accounting to do." The thud of the black binder hitting the metal table was the only sound in the cavernous room. It wasn't a loud noise, but it had the density of a gavel strike. It signaled the end of the argument and the beginning of the sentencing. Victor stared at the black vinyl cover as if it were a radioactive isotope. Diane pursed her lips, adjusting her sunglasses with a trembling hand, trying to maintain an air of bored dismissal. Sloane was just staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on her designer jeans, looking like a child waiting to be scolded for breaking a vase. "What is this?" Victor asked, his voice rough. "Some kind of scrapbook?" "It is a ledger," I said, flipping the cover open. I went back 5 years. I pulled every bank statement, every Venmo transaction, every credit card transfer, and every emergency cash withdrawal. I turned the binder around so it faced them. The first page was a spreadsheet, summarized in clean, undeniable bold font. $231,480, I read aloud. The number hung in the air. "That is the total amount of capital I have injected into the Hayes family brand since 2019, I continued, tracing the line with my finger. "That is not including the interest on the fraudulent credit card you opened in my name. That is strictly cash out of my pocket." Diane scoffed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Oh, for God's sake, Marlo, since when do families send each other invoices? You helped us out. We are your parents. You are treating us like business partners." "No," I corrected her. "If you were business partners, I would have fired you 4 years ago for gross mismanagement. I am treating you like what you are, a liability." I flipped the page. $72,000 for mortgage payments on a house you told everyone you owned outright. I listed $45,000 for medical emergencies that coincide perfectly with the dates of your cruises to the Mediterranean. $18,000 for Sloane's studio rent, which is actually just an apartment she uses to film TikToks. Diane stood up, her face flushing a deep, angry crimson. You kept a record? You sat there, smiling at Christmas dinner, pretending to be a good daughter, while you were secretly tallying up every penny like we were your enemies. Who does that? What kind of sick person keeps score on their own flesh and blood? I kept score, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a razor. Because I realized that you were keeping score first. You just hid the book. I looked at Victor. You calculated exactly how much you could extract from me without breaking me. You calculated my credit limit. You calculated my guilt. You ran the numbers on your own daughter. I just decided to audit your math. This is ridiculous, Victor spat, standing up to join Diane. I am not sitting here and listening to this ungrateful— Sit down, a voice commanded from the shadows of the back office. Victor froze. Raina stepped into the light. She held a stack of papers in her hand, distinct from my binder. She didn't look at her brother-in-law with any warmth. She looked at him like he was a rounding error she was about to correct. Raina? Diane gasped. You are part of this? I am the auditor, Raina said calmly, walking to the table and placing her stack next to my binder. Marlo has the domestic expenses. I have the international ones. She slid a single sheet of paper toward Sloane. We found the email chain. Victor, Raina said. It wasn't hard. You used your primary Gmail account to communicate with Vantapulse. You didn't even use a VPN. Sloane looked up, her eyes red. What email chain? Raina didn't answer Sloane. She looked directly at Victor. Do you want to tell her? Or shall I read it into the record? Victor's face went from red to a pale, sickly gray. He clamped his mouth shut. Very well, Raina said. She picked up the paper. Subject line, Engagement Strategy, Negative Suppression. Date, November 12th, 2022. She cleared her throat. Email body. The positive bots for Sloane are working well, but we have a problem. Her sister's design page is getting too much organic traction locally. It is distracting from the family brand narrative. Can we allocate 20% of the budget to a suppression campaign? Flooding her comments with negative reviews? Make her look unprofessional. I want her to feel small. If she feels successful, she stops writing checks. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, leaving a vacuum where the world used to be. I felt a cold shock, even though I knew it was coming. Hearing it read aloud, in Raina's clinical voice, made it real in a way that staring at the screen hadn't. I want her to feel small. He hadn't just used me for money. He had actively sabotaged my career, the very career that generated the money he was stealing, just to keep me insecure enough to remain compliant. He needed me to feel like a failure, so I would keep trying to buy his approval. Sloane made a sound like a wounded animal. She grabbed the paper from the table, her hands shaking so hard she nearly ripped it. You— Sloane stared at her father. You paid them to troll Marlo? It was strategy, Victor yelled, his voice cracking. It was leverage. We needed her to stay focused on the family. If she got too big, she would leave Newport. She would leave us. You told me my haters were real, Sloane screamed, standing up and knocking her chair over. You told me I was the only one with real talent. You told me Marlo was just lucky. She is lucky, Victor roared, slamming his hand on the table. She has a business. She has money. She has everything we don't have. I did what I had to do to balance the scales. You didn't balance the scales, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. You broke my leg so you could use me as a crutch. Sloane looked at me. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking at me with pity or disdain. She was looking at me with horror. She realized that the empire she thought she was building was a lie, and the competition she thought she was winning against me was rigged by our own father. All those bad reviews, I whispered. The bots that tanked my rating on Google last year, The comments calling my lighting amateur, that was you. That was my money, paying for my own destruction. It was necessary, Victor insisted, sweat pouring down his face. We are a unit, a family unit. You sacrifice for the unit. No, I said. You sacrifice the weak to feed the strong, but you miscalculated. Dad, I'm not the weak one. I reached for the binder. I am submitting this evidence to the district attorney alongside the fraud report. Victor's eyes bulged. The desperation finally snapped the last tether of his sanity. Give me that! He lunged across the metal table. His hand clawed at the binder, his fingernails scratching against the vinyl. He was fast, fueled by panic, knocking over a cup of coffee and scattering Raina's papers. I didn't fight him for it. I didn't wrestle. I simply took a step back, out of his reach. Look up. Victor, I said, pointing a steady finger toward the ceiling. He froze, his hand clutching the binder to his chest like a shield. He looked up. High in the corner of the warehouse, a small red light blinked rhythmically on the black dome of the security camera. Smile, I said coldly. We are recording in 4K, audio and video. You just confessed to wire fraud, and now you have added attempted destruction of evidence and physical assault to the list. Victor stared at the camera. He looked at the binder in his hands. He looked at me. The fight drained out of him instantly, leaving him looking old, small, and pathetic. He slowly lowered the binder back onto the table. Diane was sobbing now, a low, keening wail into her hands. Sloane was standing against the wall, hugging herself, looking at her parents like they were strangers she had just met in a dark alley. I walked over to the table and retrieved the binder. I smoothed the cover. The silent contract is over, I said. The agreement where I pay for your lives in exchange for your abuse? Terminated. I looked at all three of them. Get out of my studio. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not come to my house. From this moment forward, if you want to speak to me, you will speak to my lawyer. Marlo, please. Diane wept, reaching a hand out. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. You can't afford therapy, I said. I canceled the cards. I pointed to the door. Get out. The war did not start with a bang. It started with a notification. Less than 2 hours after I kicked my family out of my studio, my phone lit up. It was a TikTok notification. But this time, it wasn't a toast. It was a confession cam. I sat at my desk, Raina hovering over my shoulder, and watched as Sloane deployed the nuclear option. In the video, Sloane was sitting on the floor of her bedroom, the one in the house I paid for. She wasn't wearing her usual designer silk. She was wearing an oversized, ratty gray hoodie. Her hair was thrown up in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup. The ring light was set to a cool, harsh tone that accentuated the redness of her eyes. Hi, guys, she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. I didn't want to make this video, but I feel like I owe it to my community to be transparent about why I might be offline for a while. She wiped a tear. I am currently in a really unsafe situation, she continued. I have been dealing with severe financial abuse from a family member who has been controlling my accounts and holding money over my head to manipulate me. Today, she cut off my access to everything. She threatened my parents. She is trying to silence me because she is jealous of the platform we have built together. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes wide and pleading. I just wanted to say, if you have a toxic sibling who tries to gatekeep your success, you aren't alone. I am going to fight this, but right now, I am just broken. The video ended. The caption read, When family becomes your biggest bully. Financial abuse survivor toxic sister. She is good, Raina said, her voice devoid of emotion. That is a textbook deflection narrative. She is accusing you of the exact thing she is doing to you. Look at the comments, I said, pointing at the scrolling text. OMG, stay strong, queen. Cut her off. Jealousy is a disease. Drop the Venmo. We will support you. My stomach churned. In the court of public opinion, I had just been convicted without a trial. Then the second wave hit. My phone began to buzz incessantly. It wasn't strangers. It was family. My Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister who lived in Florida and hadn't called me in 3 years, sent a text that took up the entire screen. "Marlo, I just got off the phone with your mother. She is hysterical. I cannot believe you would abandon your parents like this when they are struggling. Victor told me about the renovation loan you promised and then yanked away. You are a wealthy business owner. Marlo, do you have no shame? Apologize to them and turn their cards back on. Family is all we have." I didn't reply. "Do not engage," Raina warned, seeing my thumb hover over the keyboard. "That is what they want. They want you to fight in the mud. If you argue on Facebook or text back, you look defensive. You look like the crazy sister." "So I just let them lie?" I asked, my voice tight. "No," Raina said, sliding a document across the desk. "You let the law speak. The law is boring. The law is slow. But the law doesn't care about crocodile tears on TikTok." We spent the next 3 hours building the firewall. I did not post a rebuttal video. I did not make a cryptic Instagram story. Instead, I logged into the portal for the Federal Trade Commission. I filed the official identity theft affidavit. I listed the credit card ending in 4098. I listed the unauthorized lease agreement for the vehicle. I attached the rejection letter for the second card. Then, I drafted the letters. Raina had a template. It was cold, clinical, and terrifyingly polite. To Diane and Victor Hayes. This letter serves as formal notice that all unauthorized use of the identity, credit, and personal information of Marlo Hayes must cease immediately. Any further attempts to access accounts, open lines of credit, or misrepresent financial standing using said identity will be forwarded to the Fraud Division of the local police department. Regarding the defamation, please be advised that the video posted by Sloan Hayes on May 12th contains demonstrably false allegations regarding financial abuse. We are in possession of forensic accounting records totaling $231,000 in voluntary support provided by Marlo Hayes. If the defamatory content is not removed, we will pursue a civil suit for libel and damages to professional reputation. I sent it via email. I sent a copy via certified mail. "Now," Raina said, checking her watch, "we wait for the cracks to show." It didn't take long. The thing about lies is that they require maintenance. The truth just sits there, and my family had built a skyscraper of lies on a foundation of rented servers. At 4:30 in the afternoon, my studio phone rang. Not my cell. The landline for the business. I checked the caller ID. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a New York area code. "Studio Marlo. This is Marlo speaking." "Hi. Marlo, this is Jessica from the marketing team at Lumina," a bright, professional voice said. My heart skipped a beat. Lumina was a high-end wellness brand. They were one of Sloane's biggest sponsors. I had seen her unboxing their diffusers and yoga mats for months. "Hi, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice even. "How can I help you? Are you looking for event design?" There was a pause, a hesitation. "Actually, no," Jessica said, her tone shifting to something more confidential. "I am calling because, well, you are listed as the emergency contact and the billing administrator on the invoices we have on file for Sloan Hayes. We have been trying to reach her management team, Vantapulse, but the emails are bouncing back." I closed my eyes. Of course, I had cut the payment to Vantapulse this morning. Their servers had likely auto-suspended the accounts, including the fake email addresses they created for management. "I see," I said. "We have a bit of a situation," Jessica continued, sounding awkward. "We are running the analytics for the quarter, and, well, since about 9 o'clock this morning, Sloane's engagement has just vanished, like dropped by 98%. We usually see a steady stream of comments, but today, it is a ghost town. And the comments that were there yesterday? A lot of them have been flagged by Instagram as spam and removed." She paused again. "We are preparing to renew her contract for the fall campaign. It is a $60,000 contract. Marlo, but our data team is flagging this as potential fraud. Do you know what is going on?" I held the phone tight. I could have lied for her. I could have said it was a glitch. I could have said Sloan was being targeted by hackers. That is what the old Marlowe would have done. I would have covered the cracks to keep the family looking perfect. But then I looked at the screenshot of Sloane's crying face on Raina's laptop screen. Financial abuse. Jessica, I said slowly, I cannot speak to Sloane's current social media strategy. However, I am currently conducting an internal audit of my own finances regarding payments made to third-party vendors on her behalf. Oh, Jessica said. The word was heavy. She understood corporate speak. An audit? Yes, I said. If your legal department needs documentation regarding the origin of the engagement metrics or the vendors used to procure them, I can provide the invoices from a company called Vantapulse Media Group. I believe that might clear up the discrepancies in your data. There was a long silence on the other end. Invoices for procurement? Jessica asked, her voice dropping. She bought the traffic? I will send the files to your legal compliance officer, I said. I want to make sure I'm fully transparent. Right, Jessica said, sounding brisk now. Yes, please do that immediately. Thank you, Marlowe. Click. I hung up. You just fired the kill shot, Raina said softly. I didn't tell them she was a fraud, I said, staring at the phone. I just offered to share the receipts. 10 minutes later, my cell phone rang. It was Sloan. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Sloan? I let it go to voicemail. Then a text. Sloan, 4:55 p.m. What did you do? Lumina just emailed me. They are pulling the contract. They said they are investigating me for breach of contract and metric manipulation. Marlowe, pick up the phone. Sloan, 4:57 p.m. Please, I am sorry about the video. I will delete it. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them the bots were a prank or something. I can't lose this deal. It is the only real money I have coming in. Sloan, 5 p.m. Marlowe. Please, Mom is screaming at me. Dad is locked in his office drinking. I don't know what to do. Give me a month. Just give me 1 month to fix the image and I will pay you back. I swear. I read the messages. She was bargaining. She was panicked. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry the consequences had finally found her address. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. Marlowe, 5:02 p.m. You do not have a month. You have 24 hours. I hit send. Then I typed the second part. Marlowe, 5:03 p.m. Condition 1. You delete the video about me immediately. Condition 2. You post a public apology stating that your claims were false. Condition 3. You remove the video of the toast where Mom and Dad insulted me. Condition 4. You sign the document Raina is emailing you right now, admitting that the debt on the credit card belongs to the family, not me. I watched the 3 little dots appear as she typed, then disappear, then appear again. Sloan, 5:05 p.m. If I admit the debt, Dad goes to jail? Marlowe, 5:06 p.m. That depends on Dad, but if you don't do these things by 5 o'clock tomorrow, I won't just send the invoices to Lumina. I will release the full forensic report to every brand you have ever tagged. I will let the truth speak for itself. I set the phone down. She will crumble, Raina predicted. She has no spine. She is all aesthetic. I know, I said. But the apology isn't for me. Raina, I don't care what they say anymore. Then what is it for? It is for the record, I said. I am done being the villain in their story. If I am going to walk away, I am going to walk away with my name clean. They can keep the house. They can keep the debt. But they don't get to keep my reputation. The forensic audit had moved from the digital realm of credit cards and bot farms to something far more physical, the bricks and mortar of my childhood home. Raina had spent the last 3 hours on the phone with the county clerk's office and a title company contact she knew from her days in fraud investigation. When she finally waved me over to her desk, her face was not angry, it was pale. You need to sit down for this, Marlowe, she said. I pulled up a chair. What is it? Did they miss a property tax payment? They didn't just miss a tax payment, Raina said, turning the screen toward me. The house is gone, Marlowe. In every way that matters, the house is gone. I stared at the document on the screen. It was a title report for the Victorian estate on Maplewood Drive. My father always called it the legacy estate. He loved to tell guests that he had paid off the mortgage in 1998, cementing our family's status in the neighborhood. There are 3 liens on the property, Raina pointed out, her finger tracing the lines: first mortgage, second mortgage, and a home equity line of credit that was opened 2 years ago. A HELOC? I asked. For how much? $250,000, Raina said, and it is maxed out. I did the math in my head. The house was worth maybe $800,000 in the current market, if they had 3 loans against it. They have stripped the equity, Raina confirmed, reading my silence. The house is leveraged to 95% of its value. If the market dips even 1%, they are underwater, but that is not the worst part. She clicked to the next tab. It was a PDF of a loan modification agreement from 6 months ago. Victor was struggling to make the payments on the second mortgage, Raina explained. To avoid foreclosure, he applied for a restructuring deal with a private lender, the kind that charges predatory interest rates because they don't ask too many questions, but even they needed proof of income. She zoomed in on a paragraph in the middle of the document. Guaranteed monthly contribution from tenant family member, $3,200. He listed your monthly transfer as income, Raina said. He told the bank you were a tenant paying rent. He used your money to prove he could service the debt. So, I asked, feeling a dull ache in my chest. I knew I was paying for the house. That isn't new. Look at the signature page, Raina said. I looked. At the bottom of the document, there were 2 lines for signatures. One was signed Victor Hayes. The other line was labeled Guarantor, Contributor. On that line was a signature, Marlowe Hayes. I stared at the loops and curves of the ink. It looked like my signature. It had the same sharp M and the same trailing S, but I had never seen this document in my life. I was not in Connecticut 6 months ago. I was in New York overseeing a runway installation. That is a forgery, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It is a good one, Raina noted. He probably traced it from one of your old checks. But here's the reality. Marlowe, by signing your name, he made you legally liable for the debt restructuring. If he defaults, and he will, this lender can come after your assets. They can come after your studio. They can come after your personal savings. I felt the room spin. But here's the catch, Raina continued, her eyes sharp. If you continue to send that $3,200, even once more, a lawyer could argue that you were aware of the arrangement and that you ratified the contract by performance. You would be validating the fraud. I understood immediately. My help was the trap. If I kept paying to be a good daughter, I was legally handcuffing myself to a sinking ship. If I stopped, the ship would sink, and they would blame me for the wreckage. He stole my hand, I said, looking at my own fingers. He stole my hand to sign away my future. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked down. It wasn't my parents. It was a Google alert I had set up years ago for Sloan Hayes. Marketing daily. Influencer bubble bursts. Brands distancing themselves from Sloan Hayes amid engagement irregularities. I picked up the phone and opened Instagram. I went to Sloan's profile. Yesterday, she had 52,000 followers. Today, the number was flickering. 48,000, 45,000, 41,000. It wasn't just that I had stopped paying Vantapulse. It was that the platforms were purging the bots. Without the monthly injection of cash to the server farm, the fake accounts were going dormant or being deleted by the algorithm. I clicked on her latest photo, the one she posted yesterday with the toxic sister caption. The comments section, which usually had hundreds of generic love this and fire emojis, was now a wasteland. There were only 12 comments, and they were real people. User 129. Wait, why did her follower count drop by 10K in an hour? Brand Watch. This account has suspicious activity. Jessica Lumina. Please check your email regarding contract termination. The illusion was collapsing in real time. The Sloan-style empire wasn't crumbling because of a scandal. It was crumbling because the electricity had been cut off. She was shouting into a void, and for the first time, no one was paid to shout back. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said Mom. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Answer it, Raina said softly, but put it on speaker. You need to hear this. I tapped the green button. Marlo? The voice on the other end wasn't the screeching harpy from the studio yesterday. It wasn't the mocking woman from the toast video. It was the soft, fragile voice of the mother who used to read me bedtime stories 30 years ago. Marlo, baby, are you there? I am here, I said, my voice neutral. Oh, thank God, Diane breathed. I have been so worried. I couldn't sleep last night. I just kept thinking about how we got here. We are a family. Marlo, we are supposed to be on the same team. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. I know your father was harsh, she continued, her voice trembling with emotion. And I know Sloan can be difficult. She is young. She doesn't understand the world like you and I do. But Marlo, we are drowning. The house, the bank called today. They said if the payment doesn't clear by Friday, they are starting proceedings. She sniffled. It sounded genuine. I just miss you, she whispered. I miss my little girl. I miss the way we used to be before all this money business got in the way. Can't you just come home? Just for dinner? We can make your favorite roast chicken. We can talk. No lawyers. Just us. For a second, just one singular, dangerous second, I felt my resolve crack. I remembered the smell of that roast chicken. I remembered the way the kitchen light hit the table in the evening. I remembered wanting, more than anything in the world, to hear my mother say she missed me. The little girl inside me, the one who had worked 3 jobs to buy their approval, wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that the love was real and the money was just a misunderstanding. But then I looked at the screen of Raina's laptop. I saw the forged signature, Marlo Hayes. And then, unbidden, the audio from the toast video played in my mind. Thank God Marlo isn't here to ruin the vibe. She is only good for the wire transfers. I closed my eyes. She didn't miss me. She didn't miss her daughter. She missed the guarantor. She missed the credit score. She missed the human shield who stood between her and the consequences of her own greed. The roast chicken was just bait. The dinner table was just the negotiation room. Mom, I said. Yes, honey. Her voice lifted, hopeful. Did you know? I asked. Know what? Did you know Dad signed my name on the loan modification 6 months ago? The silence on the other end was instant and total. The soft, weeping mother vanished. The hesitation told me everything. Marlo, listen, she said, her voice shifting back to that sharp, frantic tone. It was a formality. We didn't want to bother you while you were busy. It was for the house. The house is for you eventually. We did it for you. You committed a felony for me, I corrected. Don't use words like that, she snapped. We are your parents. You owe us. After everything we sacrificed to raise you, you are going to let the bank take the house over a signature? You are going to put your mother on the street? No, I said calmly. I am not putting you on the street. You put yourselves there, and you tried to drag me down with you. Marlo, if you don't fix this... Goodbye, Diane, I said. I hung up. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It had slowed down to a steady, heavy rhythm. The grief was there, but it was cold, like a stone in my gut. I wasn't mourning the loss of my parents. I was mourning the realization that I never really had them. She knew, Raina said. It wasn't a question. She knew, I agreed. She was probably the one who practiced the signature. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the harbor. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. We are not going to sue them for the money, I said. Raina looked surprised. What, Marlo? They owe you nearly $250,000, plus damages. If I sue them for the money, this drags on for years, I said. They don't have the money. Raina, you saw the accounts. They are broke. If I win a judgment, I get nothing but legal fees and more years of hearing their voices in court. So you are just going to walk away? No, I said, turning back to her. I am going to get something more valuable than money. I walked back to the table and tapped the binder. I want my name back. I want my credit back. And I want to ensure they never, ever have the legal standing to contact me again. I looked at the stack of evidence, the bought invoices, the credit card fraud, the forged mortgage documents. Set up a meeting, I told Raina. Not at the house, not here. Rent a conference room at a neutral law office. Hire a security guard. What is the play? Raina asked, opening her calendar. We offer them a deal, I said. I won't file the police report for the forgery on the mortgage. I won't send the fraud packet to the district attorney regarding the credit cards. I will keep them out of prison. In exchange for what? In exchange for a full confession, I said. They sign a document admitting to the identity theft, the fraud, and the emotional abuse. They sign a restraining order against themselves, and they sign a release of claims on any future assets I acquire. And the house? Raina asked. The house is the bank's problem, I said. I want them to sign an affidavit stating that the signature on that loan is a forgery. That gets me off the hook. Once that is filed, the bank will foreclose. They will lose the house. But that is their choice. They can lose the house and go to jail, or they can lose the house and stay free. I picked up my purse. They called me a freeloader, I said, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. Tomorrow, I am going to show them exactly what it costs to be free. The conference room I had rented for the final showdown was designed to be devoid of emotion. It had gray walls, a long table made of synthetic wood, and fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. It was a sterile vacuum, the perfect place to suffocate a lie. I arrived 15 minutes early with Raina and my lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Sterling was a man who spoke in short, declarative sentences and viewed tears as an inefficient use of billable hours. We set the stage. On the left side of the table, we placed a single, thin folder. On the right side, we stacked the evidence, the black binder, the forensic accounting report, the police affidavits, and the cease and desist orders. At 10 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Victor, Diane, and Sloane walked in. They looked diminished, without the backdrop of their curated living room or the flattering lighting of a ring light. They just looked like three tired, desperate people in expensive clothes they could no longer afford. Diane tried to rush toward me the moment she saw me. Her arms were open, her face arranged into a mask of maternal anguish. "Marlo," she breathed, reaching out. "Oh, thank heavens. Let's stop this nonsense and go." "Sit down," Mr. Sterling said. He didn't shout. He didn't even look up from his notepad. He just issued the command like he was training a dog. Diane froze. She looked at me, waiting for me to intervene, to soften the blow. I stared back at her with the blank indifference of a stranger. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just pointed to the 3 empty chairs on the opposite side of the table. They sat. "We are not here to negotiate," I began, my voice steady. "We are here to select an outcome. You have 2 choices. They are non-negotiable." Mr. Sterling pushed the thin folder toward them. "Option 1, I said. You sign this document. It is a confession of judgment admitting to the misuse of my identity to secure credit. It is a formal statement that the signature on the loan modification was a forgery. It includes a permanent no-contact order. If you sign this, I will not file criminal charges. I will simply file the affidavit with the bank to clear my name, and I will walk away." Mr. Sterling then rested his hand on the massive stack of evidence on the right. "Option 2, I continued. You refuse, in which case, at 11 o'clock, Mr. Sterling files the police report for identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The district attorney has already indicated interest in the scale of the Vantapulse payments. You will be arrested, you will be indicted, and I will sue you in civil court for every penny you stole. plus punitive damages. Victor's face turned a violent shade of purple. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "You would send your own father to prison?" he hissed. "Over money? We raised you. We put a roof over your head." "You put a roof over my head using my college fund," I shot back, "and then you mortgaged that roof using my credit score." "This is blackmail," Victor shouted, standing up. "I will not be threatened by my own daughter. You think you can ruin us? I have friends in this town. Marlo, I will tell everyone what an ungrateful, unstable brat you are. I will ruin your business. I will make sure no one in Newport hires you again." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop, and hit the spacebar. The video from the studio security camera projected onto the white wall behind me. The audio was crisp and clear. "We need $50,000. Marlo, today, I did what I had to do to balance the scales. Give me that." On the screen, Victor lunged at me. The violence was undeniable. The desperation was pathetic. Then, the audio shifted. It was the voicemail he had left me. "You don't get to punish us. We are going to have a very different conversation, a very public conversation." I paused the video on the frame of Victor's contorted, angry face. "Go ahead, Dad," I said softly. "Tell your friends, tell the community, but just know that if you try to destroy my reputation, I will release this footage. I will post it on every platform Sloan uses. I will send it to every client you have left. I am not blackmailing you. I am simply preparing my defense." Victor sank back into his chair. He looked at the screen, then at me. He realized, finally, that he had no leverage. He was bringing a knife to a drone strike. "Marlo, please." Diane wept, clutching a tissue. "We are family. Family forgives. Family supports each other. Why are you doing this?" "Because you stole from me," I said, "and because you laughed about it." "We can pay you back," Sloan interjected, her voice shrill. She looked terrified, her eyes darting between the documents. I can get a new deal. I can do sponsored posts. Just give us time." "You have no deals, Sloan." Raina spoke up for the first time. Raina leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. She looked at them with a mixture of pity and professional disgust. "But there is one more thing you should know before you decide whether to sign," Raina said. "It concerns the house." "The bank is taking the house," Victor muttered, defeated. "We know. If we admit the signature is fake, they foreclose." "It is more than that," Raina corrected. "You see, when Mother died, Marlo's grandmother, she left me as the executor of a secondary trust, a failsafe." Raina opened her briefcase and pulled out a yellowed document. "She knew you." "Victor," Raina said coldly, "she knew you had a gambling problem with business ventures. So she put a clause in her will regarding Marlo's education fund. It states that if the funds designated for Marlo's tuition were ever misappropriated or used for general household expenses, the beneficiary, Marlo, has the right to demand a forensic audit of the estate." Raina slid the paper across the table. "It further states," Raina continued, "that if such misappropriation is proven, the equivalent value, plus interest, becomes a primary lien against the family home, superseding the inheritance of the parents." The room went silent. "What does that mean?" Diane whispered. "It means," I said, "that even if you manage to keep the house from the bank, you don't own it. I do. The $40,000 you stole for Sloane's modeling career, with interest, over 15 years, that is nearly $100,000 of equity that belongs to me. You are living in my house. Victor, you always have been." Victor slumped. It was a physical collapse, as if his skeleton had turned to dust. The legacy estate, the one thing he used to prop up his ego, the one thing he claimed he was protecting, was never really his. He had stolen it from his mother, and now, his daughter was taking it back. Sloan let out a sob. It wasn't a pretty, influencer cry. It was ugly and raw. "It is all gone," she choked out. "The followers, the house, the money. It was all fake." She looked at me. For the first time, she truly saw me. She saw the sister who had built her shelves, held her lights, paid her bills, and covered her mistakes. "I am nothing," Sloane whispered. "Without the money, I am just a girl in a hoodie." "You are a girl with a clean slate," I said, not unkindly. "You can get a job. You can work. It is actually very freeing. Sloane, you should try it." I pushed the pen toward them. "Sign the papers," I commanded. "End the lie, or I call the police." Diane looked at Victor. Victor looked at the wall. There was no fight left in them. The fantasy had been dissected, weighed, and found wanting. Diane picked up the pen first. Her hand shook violently. She scratched her name on the line, Diane Hayes. She passed the pen to Victor. He didn't look at it. He just signed. A messy, defeated scrawl. Victor Hayes. Then he pushed it to Sloane. She hesitated, looking at me one last time, waiting for me to save her. I just waited. She signed. Sloane Hayes. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the quiet room. Scritch, scratch. It sounded like a lock tumbling into place. It sounded like a heavy iron door slamming shut. "Mr. Sterling took the documents. He checked the signatures. He stamped them." "Done," he said. I stood up. My legs felt light. The crushing weight that had sat on my shoulders for a decade, the obligation, the guilt, the need to please, was gone. I picked up my bag. I didn't look back at the 3 people sitting at the table. They were strangers now. They were just defendants in a case that was finally closed. I walked to the door, my hand on the handle. Then I paused. I turned back to them. "You spent your whole lives terrified of being seen as poor," I said. "You spent every dime I earned trying to look like you belonged to a class that you couldn't afford. And you called me the freeloader because I was the only one actually working." I looked at Victor, then Diane, then Sloane. "I am officially resigning from my position as your bank," I said. "You called me a freeloader. So today, I am returning the title. From now on, you can freeload off each other." I opened the door and walked out. The hallway air was cool and smelled of rain. I walked out of the building and onto the sidewalk. The sun was breaking through the clouds, hitting the pavement with a dazzling, bright light. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. A notification popped up from my credit monitoring app. "Alert. Your credit freeze is active. Fraudulent accounts disputed. Score update pending." Another notification from my studio manager. "Contract signed. The Fall Gala wants us. Deposit received." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that felt cleaner than it had in years. I was 34 years old. I had 0 debt. I had a business that I built with my own hands. And for the first time in my life, every cent I earned, every hour I worked, and every success I achieved belonged to me. I put the phone away and started walking down the street, not looking back. The show was over. The set was struck, and I was finally the director of my own life. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving to work in London, cooking dinner in Texas, or relaxing in Sydney? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. And if you enjoyed seeing Marlo take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear that it is okay to walk away. See you in the next video.